Oh, wow. Okay. I guess that's how we're doing that today. Good Thursday to you. The first Thursday show we did, I think. Right? Yeah, first Thursday.
It's always the first time.
Always the
It
first
might be
time.
Wednesday next time. Who knows?
Possibly. By the way, hey, if you're new here, thanks for showing up. My name is Darren, and this is Victor over here. He's having a glass of some adult beverage. My adult beverage today is, of course, water, because it's not even lunchtime, so I can't even have caffeine yet. So we're the co-host of a podcast called DevOps Paradox, if you've never heard of us. And in case you saw a tweet from our guest today, you might be going, why am I even here? So we talk about anything DevOps, and we'll talk more about specifically today developer productivity. That's going to be one of the things we talk about. Now, usually every Friday we do this live stream. Again, since we're all sort of on lockdown and I haven't had to travel, it's been easy. If travel ever starts happening again, who knows if Friday continues. But right now, welcome to DevOps Paradox Live. If you are new here, go ahead and type new over in the comments. We are live. See, we're really live. See if I reach out here. Oh, sorry. But anyway, today's guest is Ádám Sándor. He has been on two of our podcast episodes, episode 51 and episode 62. 62 just came out this past Wednesday. And if you haven't listened to it yet, go listen to it really fast. I'll wait. Okay. So that was, we'll sort of recap some of the things on. So this is the third time. So this is the trilogy of Ádám. And what we're going to talk about today, in fact, let's go ahead and bring Ádám in so I don't forget to bring him in. Okay, there's Ádám.
Hey guys.
Hey Ádám. Okay. So when we last left off, when we last left our heroes, we sort of ended the podcast in two different things. We were talking about developer productivity, and we were also talking about operational simplicity. Now, we were talking before we started the live stream today about, okay, how do we talk about these things? I gave an example, but I'm going to give it an even more extreme example. For a developer to be highly productive, they need, I'm going to air quote this for the moment, a good integrated development environment, an IDE. That could be something as simple as VS Code. That could be something more elaborate, such as Visual Studio or IntelliJ. Your choice doesn't matter. However, I can't take and bundle that IDE and hand it to an ops person and say, hey, go run this. Right? That's non-operational simplicity. It's the exact opposite of simplicity. So how do we define in today's world? I'll go to Ádám first. How do we define what is a good balance, if there is a good balance between developer productivity and operational simplicity?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because actually I don't even I'm not even sure whether whether the two things are mutually exclusive. So last time we talked about Knative and how Knative actually defines like a very narrow and developer-friendly interface, which is that's I think where we got around to development productivity, not having to know all the Kubernetes things. However, Knative is really complex to operate, so like adds a lot of complexity to your Kubernetes deployments. But this is still a very Kubernetes/Knative problem. I'm not sure whether a technology that gives developer simplicity has to be operationally complex. But then again, I don't have any good examples of technologies that aren't. Like one good example where they were really striving for operational simplicity or for development productivity, and they really got the operational simplicity wrong was Cloud Foundry. I'm always finding hard to remember that name, right? Which was really hard to operate, but tried to give the developers a really streamlined experience. And ever since Kubernetes basically won compared to Cloud Foundry, everybody is bashing Kubernetes for not having that developer productivity built in. So, but then I don't see that reason why the two couldn't live next to each other.
Well, I agree with that, right? But okay, Victor, you take it. I'll step back out of the room. See you, bye.
I mean, I guess it's more about timing, I guess. You need to start somewhere. You start at the bottom and then you build up. And then we got to that level of being a very, very useful tool for everybody, but maybe a bit more for operators than developers to use directly. But I think that actually the whole initial premise might be wrong. I see everybody as being developers. It's just that whomever was called before an operator is now should be developing a service for developers to use. So kind of that operator has Kubernetes cluster as a base, right? And then when we go to, let's say, application developer, they're not supposed to use the raw material that X operators are using. Operators are supposed to use that to deliver a service to developers, right? So I expect that actually we are maybe in still in early phases of the whole story, right? So maybe there was not sufficient time for operators/developers to develop that layer that converts their raw material, right? I'm calling Kubernetes raw material, but in a way it is, right? Into a service that they can consume. The same way as, let's say, if you go like 10 years behind, we were never expecting application developers to create virtual machines directly. They get some interface to create those virtual machines, and that interface happens to be called today AWS or Azure or VMware or whatever. We're just missing next phase, I believe, in the drama, in telenovela.
Yeah, absolutely. Darian, did you want to add something before I jump in with a thought?
Think away. I'm fine.
Okay. So what I'm thinking actually, that while I was saying that I can't think of a reason why developer productivity and operational simplicity would be mutually exclusive, I actually thought of one. To increase developer productivity, and this is actually the case of Knative also, you actually have to give developers more features in a way. And those features might add to the operational complexity. Maybe there isn't really a way to avoid that. If you give developers a serverless execution model, that requires that maybe by nature is more complex and thus more complex to operate. It's a good question, like how does it feel to operate Lambda, or how does it feel to operate App Engine, Google, some of these services that provide really high level abstractions. I don't know, because I've never been on these teams. So,
and I don't think that it should be less complex. Now this kind of sounds confusing, right? But everything we do every year becomes more complex, right? What we were doing 10 years ago is infinitely less complex than what we're doing today, because we are always having different objectives. What was good before is not good today and stuff like that. So I'm not necessarily looking into making somebody's work less complex. It's always going to be more and more complex because new and new boundaries needs to be. But I'm looking more into how to make side work less complex. So if I'm an application developer, right, my job is to write code, and that code is going to be more and more complex as the time passes, because we're doing more and more complicated things. But then everything else that I'm supposed to do that is not my core business as application developer should be simpler. So the way how I deploy should be simpler as application developer, right? Now, operator/developer, his job is actually to always come up with the better and better ways to provide the service to those developers. And those better and better ways are going to be more and more complex because we are evolving, right? Advancing. So it's about not necessarily reducing the complexity of our work, but reducing the complexity of things that we need to do, but is not part of our main work. Like, I don't consider the deployment as being the main task of application developer, but I do consider that that application developers should be deploying. If you understand what I mean, kind of like, I want people to have more responsibility, and that additional responsibility needs to be simpler and simpler and simpler and simpler.
Right. Yeah, and the hard part is figuring out, like, it's pretty easy to like create some kind of PaaS service. We already touched on this last time, but a PaaS service that can be widely used is very, very difficult. That will not just service a niche group of people for whom those opinions that are built into the platform happen to be the right ones. But
it also kind of, the definitions are changing, right? Kind of what is considered today PaaS and what is today not PaaS 10 years ago would be kind of amazing PaaS, right? Kind of like, if you presented it,
would have been
that's PaaS, right? We don't talk about it as PaaS today because we're kind of like moved somewhere else in definition of PaaS. But if you gave me Kubernetes 10 years ago, I would say, this is PaaS.
Yeah.
This is platform as a service. It cannot get better than this.
Yeah. And what do you think about, for example, I would like to give a good example. There are these like takes care of everything for you, and you just have to write business logic type of platforms. I wish I remembered at least the name of one of them, but they are many times like hated in the developer community because they like very inflexible, sometimes with their own programming language or whatever, and you just plug in some code and then they like generate a user interface for you and like do everything for you, and they're very inflexible and whatever. But I'm always wondering, like, are these platforms achieving that like pinnacle of developer productivity where really you only write business logic, nothing else? Because can we even agree on that? Like, is that the pinnacle of developer productivity when you write nothing else, just features for your users, nothing else, no boilerplate, no deployment logic, no infrastructure description, YAMLs, whatever, just that?
I mean, yes and no. I think it depends really on the type of developer. You have developers that are solving new problems that were not solved before, which is minority, let's face it, right? And then you have developers that are just doing things that were done many times before. You can say that, for example, I can say that the successful example of what you're saying would be WordPress, but it allows a developer, and I'm going to call it a developer, to create a website in like half an hour. And actually, I created my personal blog in WordPress. And let's keep comparison WordPress, Jackie. That's not the goal, right? So was I at that moment a developer? You can say so, in a way, right? Did I create my blog site in like, okay, maybe not half an hour, 1 hour? Right? I did. I think that it really depends on the type of job you're doing, right? If you're talking about
let's say you're doing some code. I think we should draw the line at some kind of coding job. Like, you have to implement logic. That is like,
yes,
there are if statements at least, and maybe some loops or whatever.
Yeah. Then, but even within that group, right? Kind of, there is a lot of I'm speaking theoretically now, not necessarily in implementation, but there is a lot of repetitive things that were done thousands of times before, and you're going to do it again, right? Kind of like getter setters. Kind of, okay. I wouldn't mind if actually they disappear, because they do not really I do think that we are moving towards the direction where developers are more and more focused on solving problems and not writing mumbo jumbo something, right? Whatever that is. So yes, there will always. I do believe that in a foreseeable future, before I retire, there will be the coders that are coding and writing code, kind of like one character at a time, and then there will be people who are simply solving problems that are already solved by doing drag and drop type of something. There was always that thing, like a long time ago when we were building websites with animated GIFs. There was nothing wrong with Dreamweaver drag and drop.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe everybody's too old to know that. Anyway, we had full websites.
I'm not.
Okay, exactly. So kind of there was nothing wrong with that. But then once I started building serious websites, whatever serious means, kind of, then that was not good enough. It's not that it was never good. It's just that it's good enough for certain things. We were discussing, me and Darin, the other day, something, AWS announced something like that, like no-code stuff. What was the name, Darin?
Honeycode.
Yeah. And then I imagine somebody from HR building some form of something, right? Kind of, you can say that can be solved as writing code, or it can be solved like this. Why write code for that? Why waste good keyboard on that?
Well, okay, so I've been listening to you guys silently in the background, and what you were explaining was writing Excel macros, right? That was basically what you were talking about, or at least that's one of the implementations. But that's highly developer productive, right? I could get an accountant to create the macros and get the spreadsheet right. But to operationalize that, how many times in your career have you seen a spreadsheet become a production database? I've seen it too many times.
Too many times.
Yeah, but it's never a good idea. Yeah.
It's beyond never a good idea. It's a horrible, horrible idea.
I don't agree with that. There are so many simple cases where that's a good idea. I mean,
name one.
A small accountant that does my taxes. He probably has like 27 customers altogether, which are all so ridiculously small as I am. And kind of
okay,
and it works for him,
right? But
I'm not saying never.
It's not an enterprise company, though. That's
a different. Okay. Now we're distinguishing kind of like small businesses from enterprises. Yeah. Yes, but even within those enterprises, I can assure you that if I spend a full day going from one department to another, I would find a bunch of use cases where some department is waiting for development department to do something that is basically Google Forms.
Right. Speaking of which, Google Forms, we have a survey that if you haven't taken the survey yet, go take the survey. We'll talk more about it again after a while. But anyway.
What a perfect plug, Viktor.
I'm just glad I was awake and listening for it. Okay, so let's go back to that. So if a Google form can solve a problem within an organization, small, medium, or large, and people decide to write custom code for that, what's their problem?
Too many developers.
Not built here, right? That's part of the thing.
Also, yeah.
I have to build it. We're a Spring Boot shop, so everything we build has to be Spring Boot, even though I could solve it in 10 minutes with a Google form.
Let's put it this way. If you're a developer that is writing code that the rest of the world was writing 10 years ago and solving the problems that the rest of the world was solving 10 years ago, then there is a good chance that you have out-of-the-box solution for that, whatever that solution is. Right?
This is a problem I've faced many times. So many problems feel like there should be an out-of-the-box solution, and then there just isn't, or there isn't a good one. Like CI/CD. We've been doing CI/CD for a long time. Do we have an one-size-fits-all out-of-the-box solution for several of them?
We don't.
Actually,
but wait.
Why not?
No. But let me rephrase that statement that you said. Do we have out-of-the-box solution that was solving the CI/CD problems that we had 10 years ago? Yes. Do we have CI/CD solution that is solving today's problems out of the box? No. Like it's the same thing. Like it's a similar example. Like when we got a long time ago, we were working with Ant, right? And then came Maven that came with basically not out of the box, but kind of solutions. This is how you test. This is how you do this. This is how you do that. Come with opinionated out of the box solutions, right? And it solved many of the things that we had to write before. And then we could focus on solving new problems. I mean, honestly, it's embarrassing, but the things that I was trying to do with CI/CD 10, 15 years ago, I would never dream of trying to write the code to solve that today. It was so ridiculously simple from today's perspective that I expect that CI/CD solutions just do it. Because I was really realistic, I was building something and running unit tests, and that was a luxury.
Yeah, we used to call unit tests CI/CD. Yeah,
exactly. No, you used to call unit test CI. That there was no CD expression back then.
I know.
It's a new invention.
The CD part was okay. So we're going to email this zip file to somebody. That's the CD part of it.
Yeah,
exactly.
Worked like a charm. Except it didn't. Yeah.
So except it did. Thank you for finishing the sentence. Yeah, it did.
I think that's that kind of like thing that we are always moving forward. So it looks like CI/CD is not solved, and it is not solved, but mostly because what we are doing today is different, more complex than what we were doing yesterday.
Yeah. I think previous generation of CI/CD was just automated deployments. We were at that time, like with the Puppet Chef times, we were striving for automated deployments and called that, okay, we have continuous delivery. There was like feature flags or progressive deployments, and whatever was not even really on the horizon, except in some very advanced companies. And and we called it CD. And now with Kubernetes, the deployment part is basically just gone. It's not a thing anymore.
Exactly.
We can't be finished yet. We haven't fought yet. What can we fight on?
Yeah, we agree on too many things.
So, all right. So let's get back to what operational simplicity. Now, Ádám works for a company called Container Solutions. Little plug there for Container Solutions. Obviously, based purely on the name, most of your problems you're trying to solve are container based. Is that true or false? Let's assume.
Yes. Well, that's quite interesting because we sometimes struggle with that name a little bit because we do more than just put containers in there to solve problems. Mm-hmm. But in today's landscape, especially enterprise landscape, actually containers will be part of the solution of most software delivery problems.
So what are you seeing though right now? Are you seeing more pain on the developer productivity side, or are you seeing more pain on the operational simplicity side?
Yeah, honestly, actually both, because when a lot of companies we work with are running Kubernetes on premise, and it's hard, although not as hard as running OpenStack. So it's there seems to be some level of improvement there, although I'm not a big expert on OpenStack, but Kubernetes seems to have actually gotten the operational simplicity part better than OpenStack by not adding too many all kinds of weird vendor extensions and repackagings in this way and that way. But then again, there is still a myriad ways of installing Kubernetes and day two operations and so on. So that's not definitely not a solved problem. And on the developer productivity side, there is a lot of buzz has been for the past actually years about how Kubernetes still doesn't really live up to supporting developers, but somehow managed to get so much hype, so much buy-in that developers are just kind of forced to learn it and don't complain too much about it. But it is not a very smooth workflow. And even Docker is not very developer friendly, honestly. Even in Docker, you have to be messing with Linux commands and whatever. And it has tremendous advantages in the sense that that existing Linux knowledge can be used in building Docker containers, and it's compatible with any programming language because you can basically force anything in there. But none of these are actually super user friendly, and Docker even has a very an image of being extremely user friendly. So we have a lot of work, I think, to do in this department. But again, seems like fate favors the flexible tools. Like Docker and Kubernetes, both are very flexible, can be adjusted endlessly to different use cases. And yeah, with that, it's just easier to put them in place.
Why do we as an industry tend to gravitate to the most flexible things? Is it because that we're fooling ourselves, thinking that, oh, we need all the flexibility possible so we can actually do our work?
But I must inject here myself, right? I don't think that we are going towards the most flexible. We are going towards most flexible, I think, when we are still in undiscovered land, no man's land, right? Nobody's. So, for example, let's say creating VMs, right? And let's say that I'm now talking about use cases only of those that are in public cloud, right? Nobody really complains that there are VMs of 1 gig of memory and 2 gigs of memory and not 1.2, kind of that you don't have that level of flexibility, right? Because kind of sufficient amount of time passed that we found that we had gained enough knowledge to see what works and what doesn't, and then that we can establish certain norms, and kind of nobody complains about having fixed VM sizes in cloud vendors. I mean, at least nobody that I know.
Okay.
Huh?
It's a fair example. Okay.
I mean, there are probably many examples from the past. Like, for example, I know that there were many complaints long time ago when I was young, kind of, you want to let somebody who is not you to do memory management in your applications? That's insane. That's not giving enough flexibility, right? I want to clean up my stuff from memory stuck myself, I'm a C developer.
That's a great example, but
just that we need flexibility for the things that are still have some unknowns. It can be 90% unknown, 5%, but then we get to okay.
Is the application packaging, Docker, Kubernetes, and application deployment and packaging problem still so new that we need all the flexibility of basically building a container with a whole Linux distro in it, with any possible combination of tools and whatever, and in every case we have to figure out ourselves how will we manage the base images and how the hell will we update the images when the base images change, and all these things. Do we really need all this flexibility? And I'm thinking yes, we seem to be needing it, because I'm encountering slightly different priorities, ways of managing things at our clients, that in the end we are very happy that we can oblige and we can actually, using Docker, we can come up with different strategies for building those images and deploying them on Kubernetes. But still feels kind of weird because this has all been around for years now.
But I mean, realistically, it's been around for 5 years, and for most companies, only a couple of years. But I doubt that we'll be talking about different ways to create container image 5 years from now, 10 years from now. We will not be. I don't know what we will have 10 years from now, but it will not be a subject. It will not be a talk about we'll be somewhere else. I don't know where, but it sounds, and this is not the issue that I think that we have in our industry. You just said kind of it's been around for a long time, like 5 years. That's such a long time.
Actually, you're right. Yeah.
When you speak with, I don't know, with doctors, with architects, kind of like when they say it's been around for a long time, they talk about Greek times, Greek architecture, kind of like, yeah, we know how to do columns. It's been a long time. Greeks, old Greeks, not new Greeks, we're doing it, right? So 5 years, that's nothing.
Yeah.
And 5 years for a limited number of people. Just remember, 5 years ago, how many people really used Docker? Kind of like handful of us.
Yeah, and I still run into clients that have yet to hear of Docker. Forget Kubernetes; they just haven't even heard of it yet because they are so far back in the Stone Ages.
Yeah, or even more common, I meet a lot that they heard about Docker. They heard the name, the word, but kind of like, no, we are kind of like still somewhere. I don't know where we are, but we are not there yet. We are thinking about it.
And what's sad is they're not there yet, but the company Docker no longer exists. So it's like,
oh yeah, that's a sad spot.
So if I put my crystal ball, and just to clarify, I love the name of your company, Adam. But if I put my crystal ball, I would say that 10 years from now, you will not be called Container Solutions.
Maybe we'll keep it, like IBM.
Okay, yeah. It would be. You would be presenting yourself as CS.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a negative comment, just to clarify. But
no, I get it. It's a good. I think so too. That we'll probably not be talking about containers. However, let's maybe actually appreciate the flexible technologies that's like, actually Docker, for those companies who never heard about Docker and they decide they want to use Docker, tomorrow they will be able to use Docker. They'll not have to teach their programming languages, their technology stacks, whatever, and they will be able to enjoy the benefits what Docker gives them. And it's even true about Kubernetes to a pretty large degree. Maybe your application will not be scaling nicely. Maybe it will have downtime, even though it runs on Kubernetes when it's getting upgraded or whatever. But it will probably work. You'll probably make it work, and you can use Kubernetes as your new application management interface, basically, for all your things, new and old, which is pretty nice, actually.
But that's the funny thing. The other day, I recorded an episode which is happening in the future. So kind of like this is back to the future type of conversation. And we talked about how, at least I say that the most advanced common denominator that I can think of right now is containers. It's not even Kubernetes. We're still fighting ECS, kind of like serverless. But containers are the most advanced common denominator that nobody's arguing against. We may still discuss whether you run it directly as Docker instead of Kubernetes, whether you run it as Kubernetes, whether you run it. So kind of above it is still a discussion, but kind of the most advanced common denominator that nobody disputes, that's a container. There is no application that cannot run in a container, excluding macOS and then mainframe. We are just now discussing how will that run. But it's going to
which is actually very interesting if you look at what the crappy technology containers actually are. Right? Just it's a zip file and a bunch of Linux kernel tricks cobbled together to produce something of an isolated-ish environment. And
this is now interesting because a while ago you mentioned kind of like, it's 5 years ago. Actually, containers, building blocks of containers are part of Linux kernel for what, like 15 years, 20 years, give or take, right? Kind of like, it's been there forever.
Some of them, not all of them.
I mean, not all, but of course we went crazy and stuff like that, and then that exploded. But I mean, Google has been running containers long time before anybody knew that they're running containers. Lambda is most likely, I don't know, it's kind of like not public, but Lambda is based on containers, and they're not Docker containers. And that the Lambda probably exists actually long before Docker, right? I think so, at least. Anyways, kind of like, so it took us considerable amount of time to get to that point that somebody says this is something that should be used by masses, and then only a couple of years passed.
And it's a surprising popularity, because it works. This is a very good example of a technology that sounds crap, but it just works so well that it still is great.
So in building, all right, so let's go back and talk a little bit more about, because we're bashing the container right now.
No, we're glorifying it.
We're glorifying
and
it
bashing at the same time.
And bashing, right. We're saying both things.
It's a glorious mess.
So if containers today, and today the short answer today is Docker, right? Or whatever that implementation is. No, hang on a second. Give me a second. Pause. The actual implementation of how Docker is doing it today, how a Docker image is built today, how does that get improved upon? How can that be better for developers and even more better for operations?
Well, if I can give my opinion, it's proper dependency management, like and we have been talking about this with colleagues years ago, that basically, Docker just executes it. When you're building a Docker image, you're just executing a series of commands that happen to put some files somewhere, and that's it. There is very little meta information available. Where does everything come from? Why did it come from there? What needs to change when something else changes? So I think what would massively improve things would be a dependency management system, something like Maven, or on a more generic level, Nix, let's say, that actually knows what it's doing, and that would make finding vulnerabilities, upgrading images, and so on much more streamlined, and could be. I'm not sure if it would be helpful for developer productivity, but it actually might be, because if you know all your dependencies, you can just maybe have faster image builds using that information, not just caching layers, but actually just replacing a 1 megabyte dependency that happens to have changed, or really just changing your code and not using some tricks on what order are you creating layers to not have to rebuild, not have to repull all your dependencies and stuff like that. So that's my answer to that.
Yeah, I agree. Except that I think that
come on, Victor, don't agree.
No. I agree, except wait, there is except that we are now in a phase that vast majority of people will not know about those improvements. I think that they're becoming. I think that containers are becoming commodity, that they're becoming transparent. That people's interest is moving up the stack, right? To me, that's similar like kernel, like Linux kernel, right? A lot of improvements are happening there. Very important improvements, right? It's getting better over time. But vast majority of people don't know. It's just happening, right? Kind of. So there are good people working on improving, but I don't think that there is any interest in knowing anymore what is happening there. Kind of like we moved. Now the next kind of level that we moved to Kubernetes API, right? Kind of that's where things are happening. That does not mean that work on containers, making them better, is not going on. It is, but kind of like it's in the background.
The question was how to improve the image building, and actually image building is still a thing that people do run into. We have not made image building go away and just be a background task.
You're actually right. I was now thinking about running containers, and you're right. You're right.
So and with image building, the hard part is that the polyglot thing that it's not technology specific, but the different dependency management things are technology specific. Are like there is dependency management for Java, for Golang, for Rust, for whatever, and that is not very unifiable. Even when you think of it should be maybe it should be unified, and it should be like Docker images shouldn't be built using these primitive methods, but then the unification can currently only be done on the level of like just running some Linux commands that put files somewhere. And that's a bit of a shame. That's
okay.
Because it's also hard for developers to understand. Like I struggled to build fucking Java applications so many times, like actually kind of every time. And I know Docker, I know Java, and then when I have to build a Docker image out of a Java source code, I'm always struggling which of the 5 different ways to pick.
There's only one, and it's called Gradle. So it doesn't matter.
I recently found this framework from Google, Dig or Dib or something like that, that actually builds.
Are you talking about Jib?
Jib.
Oh, Jib.
Yes.
Yeah.
Jib, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know about that, and that's amazing. Actually, it just does it for you without you having to mess with Docker files. But then again, you're not building inside a container, so you don't have all that reproducibility. You actually have to have Maven on your machine. So not perfect again.
Yeah. Well.
And kind of that's the limit that I'm trying. Kind of, I have difficulty to establish. More and more things are moving out of the domain of specific language, specific application, like networking certificates, storage, and all those things. Things that we were worrying about inside of applications are now somewhere else. Yep. And I'm starting to think that we need something like that for building as well. Kind of like, really, give me source code, build your application, get out. I mean, it's not that. It's one of those things. It's not that difficult. It shouldn't be that difficult. Because we've been struggling with building applications for so long, and I honestly don't care anymore. Kind of like before, I was like Gradle, maybe I don't care anymore. Kind of, please, kind of, it's just whatever builds.
That was a heated debate, never settled, right? So apparently, it is not an easy problem. That was a heated debate and never settled in the end. So it's.
Well, actually, the settle part of it is you choose Maven or you choose Gradle. Just don't choose Ant.
Yeah, at least that much was settled. Yeah.
Wait, you don't choose Ant because we have Gradle. When we had only Ant and Maven, actually, I had a lot of arguments in favor of Ant.
Yes, absolutely. But now that you have the two, then yeah. Okay, so fast forward 5 years. It's 2025, July 2025. The world health is now all good. We're all traveling on planes again. What is happening with Kubernetes? What do you think?
We will disagree now.
Or do we care? So go. I'm going to step out.
5 years, it's such a long time. It's much longer time.
You just said
than
it isn't, Victor. We are not agreeing there.
So it's 20 releases.
I think we just established that 5 years is not a long time.
So, all right. So it's 20
Sorry, go
releases.
ahead.
So we're at 20 releases of Kubernetes from now. That's 5 years, right?
Yeah.
What do we have? What's going on?
I think we will be looking into layers above Kubernetes. I think we will be looking what is now Cloud Run and what is Fargate and so on and so forth. I don't think that we will speak about any of those because I think that they are pioneers in a way that will be washed away as being early failures because everything initially is all early attempts are failing. But I think that we will not be talking about Kubernetes much.
I would say we actually might, like in the sense like we are still talking about Linux kernel. We don't care about it too much, but it is there and it is a thing. It's not like we don't care about the exact development. We'll definitely not care what's the latest feature in Kubernetes. That's gonna be super boring. Something ingress has been added, new kind of TLS support and whatever. There is not going to be anything interesting. But we will know that Kubernetes is that thing that powers everything, and there will be different kind things built on top of it, like a native, some PaaS implementations, and those I think will also come up with their own packaging of Kubernetes, because they will be fed up with the fact that nobody can fucking install the thing. They will want to sell their PaaS product to customers, but they know that that at some level those customers will have to be able to run Kubernetes. So they will package the management of Kubernetes into that product, and then there will be some competing Kubernetes packages, basically, or implementations. That would be my idea of how the future will look like. It will not disappear.
Yeah.
It's too big, and too many people are just getting on board, as we discussed. That it's not that low level thing yet.
I mean, to me, I like the comment from Alex that posted just Kubernetes is dead in 2025. Serverless is the future. Now, what I would interpret that is that Kubernetes is not dead. Kubernetes will be everywhere in 2025, absolutely everywhere, kind of from IoT to monolithic something, everywhere. But it will be dead in terms that we are not talking about it with such excitement. It is becoming equivalent of a kernel that many people care about today, just as many people cared in the past. But it's not the excitement. So kind of if we change the word dead, is that Kubernetes is not exciting in 2025. I agree. When something becomes available everywhere, it's not the talk of the town. Kind of like we are not talking about, I don't know, like cars. We're talking about, I don't know, flying cars now. That's the excitement, kind of like who's gonna be the first one to have
and actually it's a perfect metaphor for my concern about Alex's comment. There is that serverless has been the future for a long time now, actually, like for suspiciously long, without like that much uptake in a way. So I feel like serverless is a bit like the flying cars. We have some. Okay, it's better than flying cars right now. We have some of it, but I'm not sure 2025 will see serverless already like taking over big time.
But I think that it will. I do think that 2025 we will be talking about serverless being a real thing. I don't think it's a real thing today, just to clarify. 2025 will be a real thing, but serverless in 2025 will be containers running in Kubernetes with abstraction layer on top. Lambda is containers. Just to clarify, it's containers. Kind of like it's just that it's an early attempt that is flowed in so many ways. It will. I think that serverless or some other name is just that what we will call the next thing on top. Whatever that, maybe, I don't know whether we will call it serverless, just to clarify, but simplified.
I would, but yes, it is true, but like to just clarify, like, so we don't get lost in the definitions of it, is like, I still think serverless is not about whether it's running on containers or not. Right? It's the programming model and the runtime model, basically. In the runtime model, it means that there is not a long-running process. And that affects the programming model big time, because it means you can't be running some big ass application framework that loads a lot of stuff into memory and after that runs really fast. Because you need to be, basically, you are way more constrained to just really supplying the business logic on top of whatever that serverless platform provides you to use the services that gives you, and not building this nice long running process with a lot of services.
But that's the part I feel like you're describing function as a service.
Yeah.
And not what I in my head have as so in my head, serverless is I worry less as a developer or a person who deploys something, not operator. I worry less about infrastructure and how it scales and all those things. And then function as a service is a flavor of serverless. And I think that's a flavor that will die miserably.
But then is Kubernetes serverless, like deploying containers on Kubernetes, is that serverless? Because you don't care much about it.
So 2025, what I see a future that says, I give you a container image and it works. Somehow. I don't know how, right? And I think that's what Cloud Run is. That's what Azure Container something is. It's an early stage, so I don't think we are there, right? So I just think that function as a service is a pioneer in serverless, which will fail miserably. It's the same way as how Mesos failed miserably. It's a great idea. It was amazing what Mesos did.
Yeah.
But it was too early. We were not
for the original
enough.
app engine, right?
Or app engine, exactly. And so I don't know, maybe what will likely happen now, this is my prediction 2025, because so many negative connotations were generated and misinterpretation of serverless over time that we will rename serverless concept into something else, right?
Yeah.
It will probably not be called serverless. It will be, I don't know, people throw container as a service, right? But it's the same thing. Container as a service, serverless, it's the same thing. Function as a service, same thing. Meaning, I give you my code, packaged or unpackaged, and you run it. And you can be a department in my company or can be a cloud provider. That's my unedited explanation of serverless. And if we just accept that just for a second, we can discuss whether that's the definition. Then actually, yes. If you would be, let's say that you, right now, three of us start a company, we're going to implement the amazing serverless concept. We would adopt containers without doubt, right? We would need some kind of orchestrator that will do the magic of scaling and all that stuff. We would take Kubernetes and we would make it simple for people.
They wouldn't care that it's Kubernetes. Nobody cares. I just want my code to run.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I care right now because I care deeply, for example, whether ECS will be run, whether my serverless will run on ECS, which is hocus pocus bash scripts, simulating a real orchestrator, right? So I think that I care a lot because we are in a very early stages of that story. In 2025, I will not care.
I think I like the idea. You're definitely. I like the idea that definition of serverless is really just run my code and not necessarily the function as a service model. And I think by 2025 we might actually have like an all serverless world. Well, probably with a lot of stragglers, but at least like a majority serverless world, is because we will figure out a serverless platform that we can trust. I think that's the biggest obstacle right now to adopting anything above the layer of Docker and Kubernetes, is that if I use some platform above that, I have a huge risk that that platform will disappear in a year or two, being an early great thing that just is too early and will not get the market share necessary to survive. And then all my lower code layers are out the window and I can start re-implementing my application on something else.
And now we're back to I'm writing a macro in Excel. Right?
Excel's been around forever and it probably will be.
I mean, there is no better alternative to Excel after work like 20 years.
No. I mean, there's the knockoffs, there is Google Sheets, but at the end of the day,
do they have macros?
They do macros. That's fine. But what I'm saying is
Yeah.
that model is great.
I'm not a heavy Excel Google Sheets user, but few people that I know that are heavily working, they say that simply nothing beats Excel. And I believe it.
Yeah. And that, I think, is how we're going to wrap today. That's sad that we're ending on Excel. If you haven't noticed, we were talking a lot about serverless at the end. Over the next few weeks on the podcast, we are going to be talking more about serverless, primarily because of the new course. By the way, you can help influence what's going to be done next. I'm going to punch you out for just a second, Adam. I'll bring you back, though. Don't go away. Go take the survey. What?
I love the go away.
I said,
You're kicked out.
I said, don't go away. Oh, geez. Go take the survey if you haven't taken it. Right now, serverless is the thing. Today, you published Azure. Have you published it yet? Has Azure been published?
Yeah, Azure has been published today, and we're missing Lambda.
Lambda's the
and
last
then
one.
I'm going to, and this is the beauty of it. We're doing serious work, right? And at the end, I'm likely going to tell you don't do it.
Yeah,
that's the trick under my sleeve. I don't have long sleeves, so I cannot show you.
So anyway, if you haven't taken the survey yet, please go do that. Down in the description, there will be links off to Adam's contact information and other things. Also, if you haven't joined up, whoops, not that. Hang on a second. Save, wrong button. If you haven't joined up at the Slack workspace yet, go ahead and go do that, please. You can interact with us there. Adam, are you in the Slack workspace?
Nope.
Why not?
No, he's hanging with cool kids, not with us.
That's right. He has his own Slack workspace. And if you want to go buy books or courses, go out to toolkitseries.com, and you can see all the courses and books available there. We're going to be focusing on serverless for the next few weeks. How many weeks? I don't know.
I would say 3, but then it's going to be turned up to be 6 months. So
yeah.
And call me when you want to get back on the topic of Excel. We can have a session on that.
We'll have to start. Okay, so
no. Wait. Do you want to commit to do within the course or book or whatever the comparison or all the Excel-like tools?
Yeah.
I'm going to give you the task. Compare it with Google Sheets.
Well, Excel versus Google Sheets is kind of like cloud versus not cloud, right?
Well, no, you
can make some kind of DevOps.
You can do Excel on the cloud too.
I know.
Office
That kind of ruins the idea, but yeah, I know.
So I personally solved the problem by not using any of those. Yeah. That's the best solution.
That's fine. Regardless, thanks for hanging out with us today. Adam, this was your 3rd time with us. So this ends this trilogy.
Yes.
Are we going to start another trilogy? Probably.
Let's see.
And it will start if it starts with Excel, that is the Jar Jar Binks episode. So
yeah, right.
Yeah. So if it
sounds good,
do that to you.
So let's be honest. It's been too much. I'm sick of it. Look.
What?
He hasn't been putting much of a fight. I expected to invite somebody big. I mean, okay. So here's the story. Okay, the reason why you're in this podcast is because you complained about some things that we were saying. And then you come to our podcast and then you agree. And then we make another podcast hoping that you will say, no, you're fucking awful.
Wait. We had a fight in the first one. That's why you invited me to the second one. I have no idea why you invited me to the 3rd one, though.
That's not a fight. I come from Serbia. You don't know what a fight is.
That would be an interesting podcast episode, right?
Anyways, I'll be following the podcast, and if I have something to bitch about next time, I'll get in touch.
Okay, man. All right. For everybody else that's been watching, if you're watching this on the replay, thanks. All the contact information down below in the description. If you haven't subscribed, go over to that side. Where is it? Right over. It's right underneath Adam. There's a subscribe button. Go click that subscribe button. Ring that bell. All right. Adam, thanks for hanging out.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
We'll see everybody else again real soon.